asked, and I won't mention the name, but he was one of the early proponents of it, said, but what happens to innocent people? And the reply was, who cares? It's only money.
So, good day everyone. Nadine Wellwood, one-on-one today with an interview with Charlie Pester. And Charlie is a traffic court agent with points. And we're going to take a look at the Provincial Administrative Penalties Act, which seems to be not getting, I think, the attention that it deserves amongst COVID and everything else. But like every government, they try to sneak through what they can. When everybody's looking left, they'll go right. Right, Charlie?
Absolutely. This was part of the concerns that people had in the early stages of COVID, that who would try to overreach and take, well, the public was agreeing to temporary suspensions of some rights. This government's tried to make a play for a permanent change. So.
Okay, and so the Provincial Administrative Penalties Act, there was a great video that was done as well by one of the lawyers on YouTube that really went through this stage by stage. And I want to talk a little bit about your opinion and views, because you've actually commented that this was tried in 2013 and is, you know, you've been involved since 2014. So this is not a new thing that they've been making an effort or an attempt to implement. And your biggest concern is that this act removes the right for a fair trial.
Absolutely. And in essence, it removes everything that comes along with that. The assumption of innocence, presumption of innocence, innocent until proven guilty. What this does is it removes that and reverses it and makes it guilty until proven innocent. You no longer have the right to a trial, period. They'll give you this adjudication process, which is an appointee that they appoint, and you will have to pay to access that. But you start from the basis that you're guilty. You have to prove to them beyond a balance of probabilities that you're not guilty. And you cannot cross-examine their evidence or their witnesses, any of their witnesses. It's up to you to convince them that you didn't do anything. And what this does is this sets up a situation where the police can, in essence, write or enforce to a standard of perfection, and even more insidious than that, to a standard of worst possible, what's the word I'm thinking of? The worst, they will overcharge. In essence, they will overreach on charges that prosecutors would normally, A, either not proceed on, or B, they would do a lesser charge on, because there will be no prosecutors in this process anymore. And there will, you know, it's just it's whatever you're charged with, you have to simply prove you didn't do it, and you have to pay for that right, okay, or pay for that access. There is no right, so.
Yeah, so in a quick kind of just a paragraph, you know, what is the provincial I mean, I have the act right here in front of me, and I'm going to go through some of these actual sections, because I think the language is so, it is not such a big deal. But when you actually look at it, this is truly written from the perspective of the government. And when it says about enhancing and simplification, and it's all written from the perspective of the government. Yeah. So the individual who's being charged, who now has to prove themselves innocent, really the onus, it makes it much more challenging for them, even though it may simplify it for the government. So give us the quick, you know, in your interpretation here, what is the Provincial Administration Penalty Act?
Basically what it does, in essence, it means that when the police charge you with something, as soon as they lay that charge, you're presumed guilty of the charge. And you have to take the steps, if you choose to go to this adjudication process where you have to present your case to establish your evidence. The Crown evidence is unquestioned. You're not allowed to cross-examine the police or any other witnesses they have. This is the thing. So any person can complain about some other person. As soon as the police lay that charge, you have to now produce evidence to prove you're innocent beyond the balance of probabilities, not even reasonable doubt. The other thing it does is, when you read into it, they're not subject to case law, so they can make their own interpretations. So the interpretations will be to the maximum benefit of the province or the police. We've seen how that goes with our current justice minister. It's all about the police. So, though that's one of the biggest things, it's just mind-boggling to me. There's actually cases from the Supreme Court that really clarify this issue, but they're trying to do workarounds. And I can probably explain it best in one of the meetings. And this would be the second justice minister I've dealt with in regards to this, Kathleen Ganley of the NDP, when they tried to push it through in the NDP. I was in Edmonton with a meeting, and they were provided with the two big cases, Wigglesworth and Goudon, and they basically say that traffic matters or traffic offenses are covered by the charter. In fact, the wording's even stronger than that. But in essence, what they then said is, we're just going to change the name. And that's what they've done. In essence, all they've done is change the name from offenses. They've now called them contraventions. And if you read through the Act, you'll see they go through that. They mentioned contravention probably 20 times in there. They don't say offense because they want to try to work this through the Supreme Court, because this will get challenged at some point. There's no question about this. They're trying to disguise it and saying, oh, well, BC did it. BC has not done this. BC has only bitten off as much as impaired driving in respect to this, but the case law is completely different on the traffic enforcement and everything else. It doesn't just end with traffic. It's everything. It's everything that the provincial government deals with. And you can take impaired driving, and anything you think that it's less serious than impaired driving, you can put it in here, because they're going to put it in here. And don't think for a minute they're not going to expand what they can do, what they can take out of the court system, because that's what they will likely be looking at doing next.
Well, the government never starts something and then revokes it. It's only one direction, and that's the continual growth of government and bureaucracy, right, and power and control. So. Yeah, so when people, when I read things like this and I see how exactly they plan to even to implement this, because they are pushing this through under the sort of multi-phase approach of, first we'll push it through on impaired driving, right? Because who's not against impaired driving, right? But the problem is, right now, you can be deemed an impaired driver just simply for having refused to take a breathalyzer without any opportunity to prove yourself innocent or present evidence accordingly. And even when I read through this, they actually can determine, they can limit the amount of evidence that you produce, whether through the number of pages or they just simply don't like it. Yeah. And I want to know, for me, it just seems very underhanded, and I don't know why the government would want to do this to its, the foundation of law is innocent until they prove you guilty. And this is a complete...
Not with this provincial government, no.
Yeah, and it's amazing because, we have this, UCP government, which, everybody is so enamored with, and I'm like, this is a conservative government. This is not even the NDP that's pushing this through.
Yeah, and I think one of the best comments I can say about this is there was a meeting, and a prosecutor told me about this meeting with one of the early proponents of this, and this was back in 2014. And in this meeting, the prosecutor asked, and I won't mention the name, but he was one of the early proponents of it, said, but what happens to innocent people? And the reply was, who cares? It's only money. And that's the whole attitude. When you dig down into this thing, that's the attitude about this, is they want to, and then the other catchphrase, they'll say, oh, well, the police have to do 2 million tickets. No, the police don't go to court for 2 million tickets. They don't even go for a small fraction of that. They don't have to go there for that many tickets. So they're trying to say, well, since we want to enforce so much, to allow us to do that, we must seize your rights away and not allow you to have the right to a fair trial. It's absolutely, in my mind, disgraceful. And the problem is, I can't get any traction on this with the media. There's just all the oxygen's been sucked out of the air, out of the room, with COVID and the different things that are, and the vaccines and all that other stuff, that this is just not getting any play because it's simply not been implemented yet. It's not like they've already passed this. So this is already passed. They passed this back in July. They just simply have not implemented anything other than the impaired driving portion of this. So that's where we're at right now. So.
Yeah, and there is definitely, to me, it came across as a means of revenue generation. And
yeah, we are talking. Well, let's just say there's 2 million tickets. Well, if they can eliminate, let's say they can eliminate the process of having to go to court and having prosecutors and things like that, and they can now create money out of their judicial system to their administrative system. They now create money out of that. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, but what we're also talking about is the same equivalent amount is going to be sucked out of everybody for the increases in insurance rates that are going to be coming along with this. So over the last year, you've seen insurance increases. If you think they were bad, wait till you see what's going to happen with this. If you drive for a living, like if you're a truck driver or a courier or someone who relies upon their driver's license, the police own you when you hit the road. Because I can tell you from past experience, I was a policeman, I could probably follow any vehicle I want for 5 or 10 minutes. And if I wanted to enforce to the standard of perfection, there's probably not a vehicle out there that I couldn't get for something. And now I don't have to justify, I don't have any judicial, with this new system, I have no judicial oversight. I don't have to worry about the courts. I don't have to worry about case law, all of these things. And these appointees, I'm pretty sure they're going to appoint people that are just going to stamp everything through and away we go. So, you know, after being involved in my business for over 32 years now and a policeman for 7 prior to that, I can see where this is going, and it is not good. So.
Yeah, and it is definitely, from what I've read, a direct violation of our charter rights and freedoms. But it is being pushed through. So let's take a look at, I do have the act here. I want to read a few pieces because, you know, people are always like, you know, oh, you're over embellishing. It's, you know, you're not being reasonable. They would never do that. How many times have you heard that one? Oh, they would never do that. But so the
No, go ahead. You can carry on.
Yeah, so this is the administrative penalty includes a fine and any other administrative consequence, including without limitation, a sanction, restriction, prohibition, requirement, condition, suspension, disqualification, or cancellation imposed on a person for contravention of a prescribed enactment, but does not include imprisonment. So it seems like everything that doesn't include the potential for imprisonment can fall under this this act.
Yes, and that's where they can get the extension and expansion on this, because now what they can do is, if they get this through, where does it stop? It may not be a physical imprisonment, but they sure as heck can financially imprison you and indebt you for essence forever. I mean, it's endless, the penalties they can apply to you. You know, short of going to jail, because they know if they impose a jail sentence that they will automatically not get it through the Supreme Court. They're going to try to squeeze it through on the fact that they're not imposing an imprisonment. The Supreme Court's going to have to be the one to answer this, because I don't see any way that these guys are going to back off on this, because the money is just absolutely crazy. It's just the kind of dollars we're talking here is out of this world. Like, you know, we're talking hundreds of millions. We're not talking millions. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars here.
Well, it's just so open-ended, right? And the impact on civil society, on us as someone who, you know, and the ability to abuse the system. as it's written here, was the part that really shook me. Because, any other action prescribed as a contravention under this act. So, they really can just whatever they want it to be, right?
They can expand it in numerous ways. Yeah. It's endless possibilities for their enforcement, enhancement, and dollar collection is endless.
Yeah, and the one thing I have to say that, COVID has really pointed out to me that the willingness of the government to push things far beyond what are reasonable, I think, have become evident to a lot of people.
Well, because I think people are, I'm trying to think of the right word. Most people are prepared to hand over a lot of what they've done. Basically, I've lived in my house for the last year, and most people that I know are the same way. But they do this on a basis that there's going to be an end to this. There's an end point at some point. We're doing this on a temporary basis to reach a different level. This piece of legislation has no end. And they're using the fact that everybody's preoccupied with, people are losing their businesses, people are out of work, people are dying, people are being hospitalized, and yet this is the kind of thing they come through right in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. So, and don't kid yourself, it will not change with a change in government, because all these governments look at this as simply a way of them collecting a lot of money. And what's funny is a lot of these governments will blame other governments for what they call wealth redistribution. This is what governments do. They want to collect money from you, the public, and redistribute it the way they see fit. So it's an absolute overreach as far as I'm concerned. And I hope that at some point either it ends, the lights go on in Edmonton, or the Supreme Court puts an end to it eventually. So.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to do that when you don't have any media support, and the media should actually be all over this. So, the purpose of the Act, it's stated here, is to adopt a simplified form and process of administratively enforcing contraventions. But, I always thought the purpose of the law was about fairness and presenting fact and evidence, not necessarily in the simplest form. And this is where I stated before how it really came across to me as this is really to the benefit of the government. It's really written in such a way that it makes it very difficult for you and I, somebody who may be charged wrongfully, to actually even present the evidence that we are innocent.
Yeah, you won't. It's simple, sure. From the police standpoint, the government standpoint, the simple fact is that they don't have to do anything. They wrote you out the ticket, the infraction, whatever they want to call it. You have to prove you didn't do it, and you have to prove it in front of our hand-picked person. And
their hand-picked process
to take that process.
Yeah, and that's the key here too. Like, they talk about expediency, but if I'm trying to prove myself innocent, I'm not necessarily concerned about expediency. And I certainly, simple is nice, but as long as it's simple on my part, this really makes it simple and expedient on their part.
There's nothing simple or fair about this.
Yeah, no, and it really isn't. And, they talk about enhancing access to justice. And really, I see this as a shortcut for them. It's not an enhancement of justice. It's an enhancement of enforcement. Absolutely, to prove somebody guilty, because the onus now becomes on the individual who's been charged. And that's really not what our legal system, not the intent of the legal system and justice is. As a citizen, you have a right to dispute if you feel that you've been wrongly charged or, something violates your charter. This really makes that extremely difficult to do.
Yeah, it's another comment I received was that, it's just like tickets when you have the fine option. Well, the fine option is exercisable by you, the accused. The fine option is not an exercisable event by the government. The accused is the one who has the exercise right of a fine option to take the step of just paying the fine without going through the court system, whereas they're trying to pervert that interpretation of it, that it's in some way they're granting you some special privilege of paying us money so that you don't have to go to court. The exercising of the option is on the individual accused, not the government per se.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I think is worthy of bringing up with this too is this actually replaces the previous process, right? Where you had an opportunity, you knew what you were being charged with, and you had a right to have your day in court.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. And so this whole process now completely wipes that out and negates that necessity and that right, I mean, which we have as citizens of this country, and says, no, you no longer have a day in court. Because I know when I read through this as well, it was amazing that they could actually just resolve this over the phone.
Well, you have to make how it would work. How it's planned to work is you have to pay to apply to do this over the phone, and you're the only one who gives the evidence over the phone. And you have to satisfy them that you didn't do it. You don't get to cross-examine the witnesses against you. So it's up to their interpretation, not subject to case law established through decades and decades of case law. All of that goes out the window. So things that were established case law that were designed to describe an offense or was not an offense, that's now out the window. It's up to their now interpretation. So they can use a maximum interpretation of any offense as well. So not only do they have the ability to enforce to the standard of perfection, they also are now granted the ability to enforce to the maximum interpretation of any individual offense, with no prosecutorial involvement and no judicial oversight. So they say what it is, and what they say goes, and there's no interpretation in court. And any case law that applied in the past, that's gone. So
yeah, because they don't have to submit that as evidence, and they can reject your plea to submit that as evidence. Yeah, it just opens the door for such tremendous abuse of power. And it is here, like if you look at Part 1, contraventions, requests for review, you have 7 days, because people have really busy lives, all sorts of things can happen. I mean, if you have to, find a lawyer perhaps, or even collect your own evidence data, 7 days is really enough time to do that, potentially, but I've never known the government to, turn something around that quickly typically. They say here that the content satisfactory to the minister. It's a broad statement. There is no definition as to what does that mean. Who knows? The minister's having a good day, a bad day.
Yeah, and they can change it on the fly too. If they interpret it one way, and if they see they're not getting the results they want, we'll just simply modify that interpretation or change the interpretation to fit what's happening, to create the overall goal, which is what they want is lots and lots of money, lots and lots of enforcement. And it will not take long till people will realize that they're frustrated by this system. They won't participate in it. I can tell you that I'll be long gone out of this. I mean, my intention was to retire in a year anyways, but with this thing, I wouldn't even think of remaining in the business I was in, even if there was room for it, because I just think it's just a worthless proposition.
Well, the worst of it is it's a win-win for the government. So I'm going to impose a penalty upon you, a fine or some not. And if you challenge it, well, I'm getting a prescribed fee in order for, right? So they win either way.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right?
And they'll put in there, if we find you not guilty, we'll give you your fee back. Well, yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen a whole heck of a lot. No, it's not. So,
well, this is designed to make sure that you can't prove yourself innocent.
No, this will. And what's really bad about it is that most people in the public, the only time they get involved in contact with the police, contact with the court system, is through traffic. Through traffic matters is the majority of it. There's other stuff, but a large portion of it is traffic tickets and bylaw offenses and things like that. This will quickly sour police and public relations greatly. It'll greatly sour people's impression of the way the court system works, because they won't separate this system from how court works. They'll just simply assume this is a judicial process, which it's not. So that'll decrease their trust of the court system. I believe that'll be an impact of this as well. So it doesn't bode well on a lot of different levels. But they have dollars in their eyes, and that's what they're interested in. So.
Yeah, it's when I read it, it was very disturbing, very scary proposition. It just. But it seems to be very consistent with the direction that the government is going right now. I've done a number of videos and we've talked about, Trudeau and some of the dictator kind of draconian regulations, and the province has followed along with that. The abdicating of responsibility. It was government's responsibility to make decisions that should have been made, and bureaucrats are making them today.
Yeah, and that's who's exactly driving this. I mean, that brings up a bigger problem is that it is an abdication of their responsibilities. Provincial governments have the responsibilities of healthcare, education, administering the court system, things like that. And they seem to not want to. They don't want to have to worry about this. They seem to just want to act as bean counters. So one group will come in and they'll want to cut the budgets like crazy. Another group will come in and they'll boost the budgets like crazy. And we keep going back and forth on this. And not once have I ever heard a provincial government, I think, frankly, in the last several decades, where they've actually went into either the healthcare system and spoke to people and actually found ways to improve efficiencies or things like that. And the dollars become a secondary issue to finding the efficiencies and bettering the system. Where they seem to want to just say, we're only going to give you X amount of dollars this year, deal with it. There's no participation in trying to improve the systems that they're responsible for. And that's very troublesome in my mind. So.
Needs to be reviewed, and I think people need to be made aware of. 2 minutes. What would you like to say to people about this?
Phone your MLAs and let them hear it, whether they be from the UCP or the NDP or whoever the case may be. Get a hold of your local MLA and let them hear it that you're not happy with this. That's the only way. The only two ways this will stop is if public pressure becomes insurmountable for them, or secondarily, if it goes and is dealt with by the Supreme Court. I mean, ultimately by the Supreme Court, I think. But the problem I see is there's just so much money involved in this. Like, this is just an incredible amount of money that ultimately I think option 2 will be where it goes. But let's not stop there. Make them aware and let them know you're not happy. So.
Yeah, the downside by waiting for the Supreme Court decision is the time. I mean, that's 5 years of, this having been in effect before somebody challenges it and it goes through the court system and a ruling is made. So
it could be a long time, yeah. So, but here's the thing. Here's one thought I've had is if this system is deemed to be not constitutional by the Supreme Court, do all those tickets they enforced in what is deemed a non-constitutional matter, do they then get reimbursed? Because any other constitutional argument I've heard of, this is a little different because then they would just simply carry on in a different matter or correct it. I don't think this will take 5 years to get to the Supreme Court. I think this would be dealt with very speedily given the nature of this, because don't forget, this is not going to stop here, because I can pretty much guarantee you that one of the legislations that the Saskatchewan government, and I've heard, not Saskatchewan, but Manitoba, I believe, has several pieces of legislation they're holding in the bag until after COVID. And I'm pretty sure one of them is pretty similar to this, to see what happens in Alberta. I know that Ontario, went back and forth on this issue a few years ago. They were going to go down this road as well. Hopefully the pressure becomes too great or something gets done to change this. But I think they're hell bent on pushing this thing through, is what I think. So
it's just yet another attack on our civil liberties and democracy, in my opinion, freedom. And unfortunately, it's always the civilian who and the citizen who ends up paying the price, right?
You know what? It's funny. One of the guys that talked to me about our interview said, when we talked, I said, you and I would probably disagree on 100 things, but on this issue, we're right together on it. So anyways, thank you for having me and the time.
Wonderful. So everyone, this is certainly a piece of legislation that I know lives are busy and there's a lot of things going on today around COVID, but these are the types of things that cannot be ignored. Again, it is an attack on our civil liberties, and you are guilty until prove yourself innocent, and you will have to pay a fee in order to even present your evidence as such. So, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today, for bringing this to the attention of so many people. Stay in the fight, because that's what I always tell people. So many people just ignore it, or I'll just drive better, whatever. But we all have to, we're all, in this particular case, we are all in this together. And, we do need to bring it to the attention of our MLAs, write a letter, pick up the phone, just make it miserable for them, actually. You have to call them. That's the only thing they seem to respond to. I mean, because I know I write our MLA and my MP quite a bit, and I'm so tired of getting the same scripted response back. They don't even read them, I think.
You could talk. Yeah, you could talk to 20 of them. They'll probably all tell you the same thing. They probably have the little card that they read it off of. So
yeah. So if you like the video, please do share it with your friends. Get this information out. The media is definitely not going to highlight this or promote it. So it's up to us as people who are concerned about what the government overreach and the implications that this will have on innocent people. So make sure you share the video, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Thanks for watching. Until next time, have a great day.